Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the causes of the War of 1812. This is a little known war. It's very important in terms of America kind of establishing its identity, but it's often overlooked. So let's make sure we fully understand it. Our objective question today is, what were the causes of the War of 1812? All right, so today we're just focusing on the causes. Not really what happened so much, but more of why it occurred. Just to put us in the correct mindset, remember that Thomas Jefferson is president. And in the final years of his presidency, he puts the Embargo Act in place. And this is very unpopular. It harms America's economy because it prevents Americans from trading with the French and the British. And the idea was we were going to play them against one another, and instead it just really, really harmed us. So Thomas Jefferson is going to finish out his second term, and he's going to follow the precedent that Washington set by stepping down after his second term. And America at this point is, financially really, really struggling. We're having issues with the British, but he steps down and another Democratic Republican, James Madison, is elected. James Madison is also from Virginia. 4 out of the first 5 presidents are all from Virginia, and he wins easily. As you see down here, the election of 1808, this little box right here, Pinckney, of course, was defeated. Pinckney will run again and again and again and will not win. So Madison is now president. Remember that James Madison, we've seen him before. He wrote our Constitution, he wrote our Bill of Rights, and he was also, most importantly, Jefferson's Secretary of State. Remember that we've seen over and over again that this is a natural kind of position to take right before assuming the presidency. So keep that in mind as we move forward. The Secretary of State almost always becomes the next president. His vice president is George Clinton. All right, so causes of the War of 1812. There are quite a few of them. Let's look at each one of them, and we'll talk about each one in more detail in just a second. But for now, we've got impressment. We have trade restrictions. We're not able to freely trade with France. Attacks by Native Americans. And of course, war hawks. We'll talk about each one of those. Those are the 4 major ones. There are some bonus ones, however, that also get thrown in there that aren't major causes but do contribute. One is the fact that the British are still on our land. Remember those forts they refused to leave? They're still refusing to leave. So this would be a great way for us to once and for all kind of kick them out. Also, it becomes a matter of national pride. We're growing as a country. We're becoming more brave and bold, and it's time for us to finally, put Britain in their place again. And lastly, if it just so happened that we get, all of Canada in this war, so be it. That would be a nice little bonus treat for us. So, 4 major causes, some other ones as well. Let's talk about each one of these. The first one, impressment. We've talked about impressment before. This was the British policy of capturing American ships, capturing Americans, and impressing them into the British military. England's having to do this because England and France are currently fighting, and they need more troops, and they're starting to run out of people in their own homeland. So instead they're going to American waters, they're capturing Americans and, forcing them to become a part of their military. Now the justification for this is that some of these men were technically born in the 13 colonies, while it was still a part of Great Britain, instead of in America. So the idea is at some point in their lives, they were a British citizen, which means in their minds, they owe England some kind of military service. That's the justification. It's super sketchy, kind of like a loophole, but that's the thing they're going with. So impressment is, of course, going to be a big issue with us. Remember, Jay's Treaty doesn't really address it like we wanted it to, and that continues to be a problem. The second major thing are the trade restrictions. As I mentioned earlier, that Embargo Act put in place by Jefferson, the idea was embargo trade with both England and France, and then when the first person finally says, sorry, let's sign a trade agreement, the other person would then be forced to do the same thing. But instead of doing that, England and France both held out, and we literally traded with nobody. So already we're kind of angry, we're feisty, right, and we're looking for change. And then, even on top of that, England has been seizing ships that are doing any kind of trading with France. So any kind of ship that is sailing towards French ports, are captured. And this is, of course, going to be an issue that we continue to have with the English, yet another reason we'd be willing to go to war with them. The third are the attacks by Native Americans. So this Native American named Tecumseh, you see his picture right there. Tecumseh was a Shawnee Indian chief, and he was leading a few attacks on Americans. And Americans were convinced at this point that the British were kind of instigating these attacks and supplying the Native Americans with weapons to attack us. This is yet another reason why the Americans would want to go to war with England. Now, a future president named William Henry Harrison, is going to fight the Shawnee Indians during the War of 1812, and he's going to help defeat them in the Battle of Tippecanoe. And Tecumseh, the Native American chief, who we'll talk more about later, ends up dying during the War of 1812 in the Battle of Thames. So more on that later. But for now, that's Tecumseh, and that man at the bottom is William Henry Harrison, a future president. The fourth and final major cause of the War of 1812 are the War Hawks. War Hawks, at this point, they're Republicans. They're from mostly the South and the West, and they are people who push for war. If you describe someone, even today, as a war hawk, it means that they want to go for war. They push for war. They think war is the answer. And the two major war hawks for the War of 1812 is Henry Clay. And Henry Clay, very, very important figure. Remember in the last unit where Hamilton kind of got involved in everything, and he was all up in everybody's business, and he had something to say about literally everything? Henry Clay is the Alexander Hamilton of this unit. He is involved in everything, and he'll be around for literally the next 2 or 3 units. He's always there. He has something to do with almost everything. And it starts, for our purposes, here with the War of 1812. He's pushing for war very, very hard. And then the second major war hawk of the War of 1812 is John C. Calhoun. Calhoun is from South Carolina, and he's a major war hawk. He'll come up later as well. So these two individuals, we should commit their names to our memory because they'll continue to pop up. Let's look at our pictures. Here is Henry Clay. Yep. I can feel some of us staring and judging him. Yeah, and he'll get worse. So just wait for that. And then ready for John C. Calhoun? Oh, definitely looks like a villain, right? So if you ever see a picture and someone looks like a villain or evil or like a vampire, it's almost always John C. Calhoun. Right? And he gets more evil looking as we go along too. So memorize those two men because we're going to continue to have to deal with them as we move forward. As I mentioned, there were some bonus causes for the war. These are not major, but they do contribute. As I mentioned, the British are still in that Ohio River Valley. At this point, we've already fought 2 wars for the Ohio River Valley. We're trying to fight a third. We need the British to get out so we can properly expand. So that's going to be a contributing factor, and also just national pride. We are a country at this point. We are America. We are proud, and we need the British to take us seriously. And if it takes beating them in a war again, that's what we're going to have to do. So all of these causes come together, and in a perfect storm, it ends up becoming that James Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war. And in June 1812, James Madison successfully gets the United States to declare war on England. So we declare war, the War of 1812, in 1812. Should be relatively easy to remember. All right, so those were the causes of the War of 1812. I have a great little activity for you guys to look at with Henry Clay, and make sure to answer your objective sheets. All right, have a very nice day. Bye-bye.